It's a 1935 Ford 1.5-ton flatbed truck, and my grandfather bought it new in 1935. Him and my Uncle Charlie, the story I heard was, drove over to Santa Paula, and apparently he traded in his 1930 Model A. I don't know if it was a truck or a car, but anyway, he traded that in for this truck. And so the two of them came back with the truck, and they had a pallet full of lumber that they used to make the bed that's on it right now. I'm Frank Robert Walker Jr., and I go by my nickname Bob. And my dad was Frank Robert Walker. He was the son of Frank Evans Walker. And I grew up in the Newhall, Santa Clarita Valley, Canyon Country area.
Now, Frank Evans Walker, he was kind of a fixture here in Placerita Canyon. What was his story? When did he come here?
Well, he came in here in from what I understand, in the early 1900s. And his grandfather had property in Placerita Canyon, and they were doing a lot of mining, I think, in those days. And he ended up acquiring the property that's now the state park. Got the upper and lower parks where they have the nature center. So that's the property where he either homesteaded or bought it or whatever, acquired that property. Some of it he got it from his grandfather, and I heard they got a couple hundred acres from a church.
Your grandfather bought this truck. Actually, he didn't buy an entire complete truck, right?
Right, it was just a cab and chassis. So it was a long ways from ready to work.
So they built the bed out of this lumber that they picked up in Santa Paula?
I don't know where they got the lumber, but apparently it's some lined up somewhere, and I guess they tied it onto the frame and hauled that load of lumber back. But he was really good at, working with lumber, and, he built different cabins and whatnot. So he was pretty skilled in that area. I think when he bought it, he was pretty active in the clay mining business over in Sand Canyon. So they used the truck in Sand Canyon. From what I heard was they would hook a drag scraper to the back, and you had to have a man operate that drag scraper. He would pull the handles, and then they would pull it across the vein of clay and use it to strip off the overburden to get down to the clay layer. So it saved a lot of labor. So that was one of the first uses, I think, that they used the truck for.
What were some of the uses for that clay?
It was used in roofing granules. It was shipped into LA. It was sort of a whitish, grayish color when it came out of the ground, the natural colors. But when they put it into a furnace and fired it up to a certain temperature, it started turning more of a reddish color. And that's the color they wanted for the roofing granules that they put into shingles.
You know something about this business. I'm looking at your t-shirt here, F.R. Walker Jr., General Engineering Contractor, Rock, Sand, and Gravel. So what, did you follow your dad into that business?
Yeah, my dad and uncle worked with my grandfather after he sold some of the park property. He had a little bit of money to invest, and he bought some tractors. They weren't new, but they were, for them, they seemed like they were pretty good. So they started a grading business back in the 1950s. And so they were doing a lot of local work, in the area, fire breaks, roads, building sites for homes. And then, as I got a little bit older, in my early to mid-teens, I started working for them, part-time when I could. And then later, in the early 70s, my grandfather passed away, so they pretty much took over the whole thing. My dad and Frank and Tommy took over the business. And then later in the early 70s, my parents bought a motel in Oregon, and so they moved up there, and then they had me pretty much take it over. Then eventually I built up released some property in Palmdale and started a sand and gravel operation there. Turned out to be a pretty good sized company, and I was making products for concrete, road base, fill sand, and did pea gravel, just miscellaneous products. So I had operated that, then sold that business in '89, and then worked over in Ojai for a couple of years. That's where I'm living now. There's a quarry there that I worked with a friend of mine that really wasn't doing too well, so gave it up, and then started working back in Palmdale again, the Palmdale disposal landfill. So I put a crushing plant in there and then worked there another 9 years, and then sort of semi-retired about 20 years ago.
Now you mentioned you're in Ojai now, and that's where you had this truck before you donated it here to the Santa Cruz Valley Historical Society.
Right.
How did you end up with the truck? How did it end up in Ojai?
Well, my grandfather, call him Papa, Frank Evans Walker, passed away in 1971. So he had a lot of things that the family had to dispose of or do whatever, redistribute or whatever they were going to do with it. This truck was part of that. And I don't remember exactly how all that happened, but apparently my dad ended up getting the truck, and it was on his properties for many years. And then finally, when I moved to Ojai, we brought the truck over there. There we go. Oh, it was right there. That's good. It's got a flathead V8, which was a pretty high performance for the day. I think those early ones were about 85 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot compared to what they're driving nowadays, but for then it was.
Now this is 1935, and I guess the first, Ford came out with these things in, I think it was 32.
Yeah, I think so. Somewhere in there, they came out with the flathead V8. Before that, I think they had a flathead 6. They could have had some earlier ones that maybe a 4-cylinder, all flathead engines.
Now I know you were able to turn this engine over by hand, so we know it's not all frozen up.
Exactly.
So what do you think chances are we can, what do you think it'll take to get this in running condition?
Well,
Would you like to see it in running condition?
yeah, I'd love to see it running, and it'd be nice if it could get back on the road and maybe take it up to the canyon, closer to Canyon Park where it came from, and show it off there when they have events.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But a good mechanic, pull the radiator off, get that flushed and taken care of, get a new fuel tank, new fuel lines, go through the electronics on it.
And of course, it needs a little bit of cosmetic work here. Interior's a little roached out, but
Interior is pretty rough.
but
the floorboards are just a piece of plywood. So you could make that up. But
the starter would be down there somewhere.
there's a
Button on the floor.
battery right over there, just underneath the driver steering wheel.
Fuel tank here under the
Fuel
seat.
tank, right? So, but yeah, it's actually pretty straight for as old as it is.
Yep.
Pretty good condition.
And what do you think? I kind of like the idea of preserving the rust look. Would you
I think
clear coat it?
You see, instead of going to full restoration, nowadays they're, I don't know if they do light sanding on it and then put maybe a clear coat to protect the original finish. Actually, this truck originally was a tan color. You can see some tan. And then they ended up taking it to a friend of theirs. I think his name was Earl Gray, and he painted it green. And the color kind of worked better in the
It wasn't
canyon.
Earl Scheib, was it?
No, it wasn't Earl Scheib. But it worked better because they used this around movie work, and it would be kind of camouflage with that color in case it somehow appeared in the background of some scenes.
All right.
So, but and then talking about the movie work, my Uncle Richard told me that he used to, they had a water tank on the back, and they used to haul water for dust control for the movies, so that when the wagons and horses were running and it wasn't so dusty. And he said that he'd fill that tank out of the creek. So they had a hand pump. So he'd pump it by hand and fill the tank up, and then he'd go spread water on the trails or roads wherever they were working, filming that day. And his papa picked up a little extra money, you know. Dad, he charged him so much a day, you know, for the use of the property. And then if they had some services like the dust control, like, you know, Richard was doing, you know, they'd pick up a little extra money doing that.
And he came up with a few clever ways to make money out here. I know there was it was a depression, but
Sure.
he came up with Walker's Placerita Camp. Tell me a little bit about that.
I don't know an awful lot about it, but I've seen the signs and the brochures, and apparently they'd have probably people from LA would try to get out of town. They'd come up here and they'd rent them cabins, you know, so much a day, and you know, people like coming out here. And then they had dances. I think they had a kind of a dance floor there where they had some musicians playing, so they do a little bit of dancing, and they had barbecues. I know I have a tool that was Papa had made it from a blacksmith here in probably in Newhall, and kind of a forked pointed tool with a long handle that they'd use to flip the ribs over. You know, Uncle Richard saw that, and he verified that that's what that was used for.
Now, you were telling me earlier that you thought it might be a fun idea to put Walker's Placerita Camp on the side of this vehicle. I was thinking that that could be kind of fun.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, I don't think he ever had any logo or anything on the truck, but, you know, it might look good, you know, to put something like Walker Camp on the side of this truck.
Sure. Now, one thing we will have to restore is this bed here. Tell me, look a little burned. What happened here?
Well, back in 2017, we had a fire going through Ventura County and where we lived in Ojai, and this truck was on our property, and the fire burned all the way around. I was there that day, and this bed just spontaneously combusted. And fortunately, we had water, and me, and with the help of a Ventura fireman, we were able to put this out. You can see a little bit of burn damage on the back of the cab.
Sure. Now, this was a stake bed. So tell me what that looked like.
Well, from the picture, one picture that I've seen of it, I've only seen one picture where it shows it in the background there in the canyon. And I don't see any here, but there's a little pocket on the other side. And it looked like they had short sides, maybe a foot or two high, where they could just drop these in and take them off on and off as they needed, depending on what they're going to haul. It'd be nice to return it to what it originally looked like.
Now, this is a dually, and when you before you brought it over here, you put 4 new tires on it. It's got 6 tires. How hard is it changing tires on a dually?
Well, it's pretty hard in this case because these wheels hadn't been pulled off in probably 60, 70 years or more. And, you know, fortunately, Papa put grease on the threads, which a lot of people wouldn't have done. If he hadn't done that, you know, it would have been really difficult. But I had big tools. I had a 1-inch drive air impact gun, and so, you know, we were able to get them off without too much trouble. But the tire man had a heck of a time, you know, pulling these tires off. They've been on there so long, you know, they're almost part of the rim. So, but it was a friend of mine, Freddie Wachter, who was from Santa Clarita Valley. And so he did me kind of a favor and took care of that and didn't charge a lot. But they're pretty expensive tires to get these now. That's why I only put on 4. I thought the rest of them could be done later, you know. So.
Yeah, you pointed out to me earlier, these tires say something on the side.
Right. Yeah, it says gum dipped. And, you know, nowadays tires are not made out of real rubber. They're some synthetic rubbers, I think they use, but this is gum dipped, so I think these are real rubber.
Now, this truck has a 63 license plate on it.
Right.
Can we assume that's about the last time it was driven?
I'm not sure if it actually ran then, because Papa moved over to Sand Canyon in 5960 after he sold the park, and he had 24 acres over there that he put a big single-wide mobile home on. And,
so this truck went from living in Placerita Canyon to living in Sand Canyon.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I don't know if they towed it over there or if they actually drove it. So it could have still ran. But anyway, by 63, I'm not sure. He probably was kind of keeping the registration going, but the condition of the tires and all on it, I don't imagine he could have done much with it.
One story I'd like you to tell me about this truck. Apparently you were witness to Placerita white oil being put straight into this truck.
Yeah, this was in probably mid 50s. I was pretty young, but I went out with Uncle Ed. We went to get some firewood because that's how he heated his cabin or his house. So we were out getting a load of wood. So, we got our load of wood and then we're ready to go back. And then the truck ran out of gas and Ed was kind of swearing a little bit. And he had a 1 gallon of white oil, he kept with him. I don't know where he had it, but he poured that in the tank and we were able to get back home on that white oil.
Now tell folks who might not know what white oil is.
White oil is a natural oil that comes out of some of the wells there in Placerita Canyon. And it's not like the crude oil that they use to make gasoline nowadays. It almost looks like a finished product. It's got an unusual smell to it, and it's real thin, similar to like a kerosene or gasoline or diesel.
So straight out of the ground and into the
straight
gas
out of the
tank
ground.
and
I'm sure it's
off you went.
really low octane, but an old engine like this, it probably didn't take much. So it ran, and we made it back.
Well, here we are next to the Saugus train station. We're going to take a little hike up the road and talk about a tractor.
Okay, sounds good. I've seen it since the 1960s. My Uncle Tommy's brought it from, I think it was abandoned up on East Walker Ranch, and he brought it down to Raven Hill Road and Pineview Road and stored it there at Uncle Ray's property. And if you look at it, it's pretty simple. You've got, the engine's a casting with a pan attached, and the center section you have your transmission clutch. Then you've got 2 more castings for the axles. And I think because of this design, and then it had these metal wheels, they were able to mass produce them, and they were really able to meet the demand and get them over to Britain where they really needed them. So,
now there's a date of 1922. The last patent date there is 1922.
right,
And it's also got a shield on it that says Henry Ford and Son.
right,
And you're donating it
Right.
here in 2022 to the
Sure,
Historical Society.
exactly.
So it's 100 years old this year.
right.
In 1922, there's that, I don't know, somebody owned it in 1922 around here in this valley. Who do you think that was?
My Uncle Richard told me that Tal Bello originally owned this tractor and that he had a clay mine in Sand Canyon. And so it could be that it was used on that property. But I know the Bellows used to sell my grandfather clay. He used to buy it from them. I remember when I was in elementary school, seeing him on his front porch. He was pretty elderly at that time. But that was down closer towards Sulphur Springs School and the railroad tracks. Well, I know they had the Bellows had property in Iron Canyon, and they had vineyards there, and they were Italians, so they were, I'm sure, making wine with those grapes.
So regardless, somebody abandoned this on the Walker property. Take it from there.
I don't know how it got abandoned up there, and there was some oil well drilling going on up in that area. And this is now it's called East Walker Ranch up in that area. And I guess it was eventually abandoned. It probably just broke down. And my uncle, he kind of liked to collect things. He brought it down to Raven Hill Road, where we all lived in that area. And Raven Hill Pineview Road, like I'd say sometime in the probably early 60s. So it sat there for years and years and years. And then finally, Tommy drug it over to his place, which was right next to Ray's, and it sat there for who knows how many years. And then about 20 years ago, when Tommy's property was getting cleaned up, his daughter, Mary Helen, offered the tractor to me, so I hauled it over to Ojai, and it's been there about 20 years. So that's all I know about the life of it.
So did any walkers actually use the tractor, or did they just haul it from place to place?
I doubt that it ran when they acquired it. So it pretty much looked almost like it does now, which is a long ways from running. And I don't have any information about any walkers ever using it.
It looks like a little tractor to me. What would it have been used for?
I would say just for farming, like pulling a plow or maybe for planting, maybe a seeder for planting seed, turning the soil over. And, they could use, these are by today's standards, this is a pretty small tractor. But, back in those days compared to, it took a pretty good team of horses to do the same amount of work this would do. And this is a lot less maintenance than a team of horses would be.
Well, unloading it from your trailer, I'm just glad it didn't roll down here out into the creek bed there.
Yeah, we were a little concerned about that, but we just took it slow and no accidents, and it's in a pretty good spot. And I imagine it's going to be here for quite a while.
Well, we're really glad that these things that came out of the Santa Clarita Valley are coming back home to the Santa Clarita Valley and living here permanently. I mean, I can't thank you enough for making the decision to do that.
Sure, you're very welcome. I'm glad to see him here. This is the area where I grew up, and anything I can do to work with the history of the valley, I'd love it. So,
Bob Walker, thank you, and don't be a stranger.
Okay, I'll be around.